John was talking to Pastor Matthew about Lucy. Pastor Matthew asked, "So it sounds like you really like her. Tell me the story of what's happened so far." John then recounted the first time he saw her. He had come to the Wednesday night prayer meeting, and then all of a sudden, there she was, sitting right next to him. After the meeting had ended, she turned to him and said, "Hi, I'm Lucy." John then introduced himself and asked if Lucy had been coming to this church for very long. She explained that she was new in town and was just checking it out. After a few more minutes of small talk, they parted ways. However, John had fallen hard for Lucy. He thought of how she had chosen to sit right next to him and how she also opened up the conversation. He felt like she had intentionally done those things because maybe she was interested in him. In the days that followed, John's feelings intensified the more he thought about her. Also, he confessed to Pastor Matthew that he knew Lucy was his type physically, so he worried he might be infatuated for the wrong reasons without really knowing her. Pastor Matthew then asked, "Was that the only interaction you had with her?" "Yes, I've seen her at church a few times since that point, but I haven't talked to her anymore. I'm just trying to figure out if God is in this or not. What do you think?" What should Pastor Matthew say to John? How can you really know if a connection is genuinely happening or it's all just in your mind? In this video, we're going to talk about 5 signs that may mean you're simply following your feelings rather than the facts when deciphering a true relationship connection. Number 1, big emotional waves rooted in small experiences is often a sign that you're following your feelings rather than the facts. "Well, John," Pastor Matthew continued, "I certainly can't tell you the future. I'm not God, so definitely pray about everything I say, and feel free to take a different approach. But to me, I think you need more evidence before you can know anything good or bad about this possible connection." Pastor Matthew then explained that while it could be a good sign that Lucy chose to sit next to John and that she then opened up to start the small talk after the prayer meeting ended, he also said, well, it could have also just been a random coincidence that she chose that seat, and she could have just been being friendly and maybe would have talked to anybody who was sitting next to her because she's new at the church, and it just could mean nothing. And while it's clear John really likes Lucy, it's also clear that John doesn't really know Lucy. Therefore, Pastor Matthew encouraged John not to think too much more about Lucy until there was more evidence to really go off of. He encouraged him, hey, next time you see her, just try to talk to her and see if a connection can grow. John took Pastor Matthew's words to heart. He tried to talk to her that Sunday, but he didn't see her. Thankfully, the next week, he spotted her as she was leaving the church and walking to her car. He didn't know what he should do, though. He was nervous, afraid of looking stupid by just approaching her in the parking lot. Finally, he just went for it. He ran over and said to her, "Hey, Lucy, it's me, John. We met at the prayer meeting a few weeks ago. How have you been?" She seemed surprised, but she smiled and said, "Oh, hey, right, I remember you. I've been good. How have you been?" They small talked for a bit longer, asking each other things like where they worked and where they lived and other things like that. There was then that awkward pause, signaling the natural end of the conversation. But before John knew it, he blurted out, "Well, no pressure or anything, but I'd love to get to know you more. Would it be okay if I gave you a call sometime?" Lucy blushed. The seconds seemed like hours were passing, but then she finally said, "Yeah, sure. Give me your phone and I'll put in my number." After Lucy drove away, John ran back into the church and went straight to Pastor Matthew. John told him what he just did. Pastor Matthew gave him a fist bump and said, "Nice work, brother. Don't get too excited though, but that's at least a good sign she's open to get to know you more." Was Lucy giving John her phone number a sign from God that John has now met his future wife? No, that is not a good conclusion from the evidence that we have. But this is a good sign that John is no longer just following his feelings. Now he's being led by some facts too, that she's at least open to getting to know him. Number 2, if your imagination is working harder than your vocalization, that's a good sign that you may be led by your feelings rather than the facts. Later that night, sitting alone in his bedroom, John was trying to stay calm, But deep down, he knew he was way too excited. His imagination was roaring. He would never admit this to anyone, but he was already thinking about what it would be like to marry Lucy. He thought about the honeymoon to Hawaii he always dreamed about. Later that night, he sensed his thoughts were even getting close to lusting. Therefore, before going to sleep, he knelt down next to his bed and prayed, "Father, I'm sorry for idolizing this woman I barely know. Help me to be wise. Help me not to be controlled by my feelings, but also help me not to ignore my feelings. I ask that you would help me explore this relationship possibility in a mature and balanced way." John then felt a lot of peace sweep over him. The next day, John called Lucy, but Lucy didn't pick up. However, a few hours later, Lucy texted him. She apologized for missing his call. She then continued to text him in a way to keep the conversation going. She asked about his hobbies, if he's read any good books, and other things like that. And John reciprocated all of those questions back to her, and he asked some of his own follow-up questions too. Throughout the next week, however, Lucy never texted John first. John always had to text her first, but whenever he did text, she would always text him back. The same thing happened when they were at church. She would never approach him, but he would approach her, and whenever he did, she was very kind and seemed happy to talk to him. But now John was confused on what to do next. He couldn't tell if they were headed towards dating or if she was just being kind, because he was the one who kept approaching her and texting her. John explained all this to Pastor Matthew, who then responded by saying, "I think you've done a great job up until this point. It would be easy to just imagine being with her, but you're actually trying to talk to her whenever you can. She seems to be talking to you too, so that's great." While John felt good that Pastor Matthew was encouraging him, he also felt like Pastor Matthew wasn't done talking. "So what do you think I should do now?" John asked. Pastor Matthew paused for a moment. "I don't know. I don't want to tell you what I would do. I'm more interested in what you feel led to do. What do you think God is saying about all this?" John paused, thinking before responding. "Good question. I'm not totally sure, but I feel like I probably just need to go for it and ask her on a date. Otherwise, I'll probably never know if she likes me or not." Pastor Matthew nodded his head and then said, "That's not a bad plan. You both seem like mature Christians. There's no harm in being a gentleman and asking her out. The worst that can happen is that she says no." Number 3, if your first strong impressions are influencing you more than the ongoing evidence, that's a good sign that you may be led by your feelings rather than the facts. So then what happened with John and Lucy? Well, Lucy actually rejected John's offer. John was disappointed, but he also couldn't stop thinking about her. He thought to himself, she did sit next to me, right? She is the one who talked to me first. He then went on thinking, she did give me her number, and when I went home and prayed about her, I did feel peace. Maybe her and I still will end up together, even though she said no to me right now. At this point, John is now fully following his feelings rather than the facts. The truth is, if Lucy was romantically interested in him, she would have accepted his offer to go on a date. Or if there was some valid reason for why she couldn't, maybe she does like him, but her heart just isn't ready for a relationship, or something else where it could be legitimate, she would have at least explained that. She would have at least given him some hope. Instead, she just said, "No, thank you. I don't see you like that, but thank you for the offer." Number 4, assuming you know the reason for the rejection and then thinking that reason will actually change one day is a strong sign that you're just following your feelings rather than the facts. So then John called Pastor Matthew. "Man, what a bummer," Pastor Matthew said. "I'm sorry things didn't work out for you, but at least you have clarity now. It's better to know the truth rather than wondering for months and months if she likes you too." And then, all of a sudden, John blurted out, "Yeah, but don't you think she might just be scared? I remember she mentioned she had just gotten out of a relationship a few months ago. I think she might be worried about getting hurt again, you know?" Pastor Matthew wanted to respond quickly and shut John down, but he knew better. Instead, he asked John a follow-up question. Interesting. What makes you think that? Did Lucy ever say she liked you? Did she ever say she was scared of getting hurt again? No, John said. It's just a feeling I have. It just feels like she does like me, but something is holding her back. But you don't have any evidence for that, right? You're saying you just feel that way. Well, yeah, I guess so. I can't think of any evidence I can tell you for why I feel this way. Okay, Pastor Matthew said. In love, let me just be honest with you. I think you're being led by your feelings and not the facts. It stung to hear those words, but John listened. After a long silence on the phone, John said, "You're probably right. I'll pray about that." While there are certainly some instances where there could be a valid reason that's holding someone back from entering into a relationship with you, even though they actually like you, in the vast majority of cases, the reason they're not going forward is because they don't like you enough to do so. The real truth is, if you don't have real evidence for something that's tangibly blocking you two from being together, and you're just assuming and imagining, hey, this is the reason this person doesn't want to be with me, even though they like me, that's just following your feelings and not the facts. It's way better just to accept reality and judge people's feelings by their actions. If someone's not open to a relationship with you, it's best just to accept that as the fact. And number 5, if the relationship connection just doesn't make sense, that's a strong sign that you're following your feelings rather than the facts if you're still holding out hope to be with this person. John spent the next few days praying. And then a lot of clarity started slowly coming over him. He thought back over the connection that they had, and he realized it was very superficial. He was really infatuated with the way she looked. And the more he thought about it, the relationship just didn't make sense. Their schedules were completely opposite of each other. They really didn't share very many common hobbies, and really, they had a lot of different worldviews that he remembered, particularly when it came to politics. So he was like, actually, this probably just wouldn't make sense the more I think about it. 6 months later, however, John met Paige. Things started out in a very similar way to the way things started with Lucy. But this time, John handled his emotions a lot better. He took a lot of the same steps, but this time, Paige accepted his offer to go on a date. They then became an official couple. Things now seem to be headed towards engagement. And so the point here is that when God is truly leading a man and woman together, the connection is actually going to make sense. You're not going to have to jump through a bunch of mental hoops to make the relationship work in your mind, even though the facts just aren't there. The actual connection itself between this man and between this woman will be the evidence that yes, there is indeed a real connection happening. If you appreciate this content, it would be a great blessing to me if you gave this video a thumbs up so that it could spread to more people here on YouTube so they can be benefited by this biblical content as well. I'm Mark from ApplyGodsWord.com. I'll see you at the next video. God bless.